Hi again, everyone. Welcome to ISIP's webinar on advising effective applications to the UK. My name is Carrie Reynolds, and I am the Program Officer for the UK here at ISIP. This webinar is aimed at empowering coordinators to recognize and help correct some common pitfalls of applications for ISIP institutions in the UK, and hopefully therefore increase the chances of successful applications. I'm going to aim at presenting for about half an hour, and then we will be open to taking questions, any questions that you might have. Everyone right now is muted, but you'll be able to ask questions through the question function. I see a few of you have already started using that, so that's great. It's on your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll be looking back regularly to see if there are any questions, but I may end up just waiting till the end to answer them all. So let's get started. We've split today's presentation into three parts. Firstly, a discussion on what makes an effective application to the UK, largely by talking about common mistakes. Then we'll move on to putting these ideas into practice by featuring a few of our programs that demonstrate the themes that we've been discussing. And lastly, we'll take some time to introduce our new member, the University of Roehampton, a university that will be accepting applications for spring 2015. So we've just realized that my slides aren't moving with the presentation, so please give me a second to see if we can get that going. Okay, sorry about that delay. Here are the 3 points that I did just go over that we are going to be breaking the presentation up into. So let's move on to the first point. So what makes for an effective application to the UK? Let's start with the easiest first. Paying attention to the deadlines. This may seem like common sense, but every placement round ISIP receives applications for sites that are no longer receiving applications. If your student is looking to go on exchange, the application must be in by the priority deadline. Due to the ever-present demand for studying abroad in the UK, it's unlikely that any exchange sites in the UK will be open past the priority deadline. This means September 1st in the fall and February 15th in the spring. If you have a late applicant, the direct deadlines stay open much later. In fact, we're still accepting direct applications for some sites for fall 2014. If the direct deadline has passed, but your student is still interested in going abroad on a direct program, contact ISIP to see if your student can still apply. Direct deadlines are often set by housing deadlines within each institution, and it's sometimes possible to find a late space for your student. The tool to use for keeping track of deadlines for different institutions is our Sites Open for U.S. Students webpage. Let's take a look at this. This is the best place to see if a student is still open for if a site is still open for application. As you can see, each site lists the exchange and direct deadline for each site. If a site has been filled, the E will be removed next to the site's name. If the direct deadline has passed, the D will be removed. I've highlighted where you can see the direct deadline for each institution, since this is going to be where it will be variable between each site, because as mentioned before, for exchange, just always plan on it being the priority deadline, but do pay attention to the direct deadlines for each site. So let's move on. An effective application also chooses sites that offer what the student wants to study at the right level that they're looking for. It's important to note that most of our universities in the UK do have at least one academic restriction that affects applications. It's important to check the directory page of each institution to see if your student even qualifies to study there. Even though it may seem like your student has chosen an adequate mix of institutions, I can tell from experience that I can tell you that the majority of applications that cross my desk do not qualify for at least one of the sites that the student has chosen. We'll talk about this in a few minutes, but having ample choice of sites is absolutely crucial to increasing chances of placement, or chances of getting your student placed in the UK somewhere. And applying for sites that can't offer the academics that are needed negates this effort. There are some common ways that you'll see restrictions within the UK. One of the ones is a semester versus year placement. Some of our universities offer courses on a year-long basis rather than by the semester. Some offer a mix of year and semester courses depending on the subject. Often, students applying for a year will have more flexibility in which courses they can take. If your student is studying abroad for a semester, they really need to be sure that each institution that they're applying for offers semester-long classes in their field of study. In addition, certain academic fields may be restricted. Perhaps there is limited number of seats available for exchange students in a particular field of study, in which case, just because they're accepted or they've been placed doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to study those subjects. Or maybe the students are restricted to taking coursework with only within one field of study. They can't mix and match across courses or subjects. If your student needs to take a variety of subjects, certain sites aren't going to be appropriate for them. And lastly, you may see that students need to submit something extra, maybe a portfolio, or maybe they need to be the major in the field of study that they're looking to take, or maybe they need a junior standing. For all the details regarding academic restrictions and to see if your student qualifies for placement at the sites that they're applying for, it's really imperative that students and coordinators double check individual directory pages. So I'm going to show you one to show you where to look for these academic restrictions. So I've taken a screenshot of the directory page for Plymouth here. This is a really good example because they have at least 2 academic restrictions that I'm going to show. I've highlighted where you can find it. The restrictions, you'll always see them under the academic notes, under the academics page of the directory page. For Plymouth, we can see here that they have restrictions on semester placements. There are only a few subjects that are available to students looking to study abroad by the semester. I think it says history, art history, English, some media arts, fine arts. Everything else are only available to students studying for the year. This is probably the biggest mistake that I see in terms of academic restrictions, is students applying to Plymouth that don't actually qualify to take the courses that they're looking for. The other thing that I have highlighted here is that this is one of our institutions where you can't mix and match across courses of study. So if your student is signed up to take English, they can only take English. If they're signed up to take history, only history. You can't take one class across different departments. There are plenty of other institutions in the UK where there is that flexibility, but Plymouth is not one of them. Our third and final description of an effective application is that the application is proactive about space restrictions. I have a feeling that this is why many of you are here today. You know that exchange space tends to be limited in the UK, and you probably know that this is largely due to the demand for space from US and international students. The good news is that ISIP has brought on 2 more members within the past year, and that our exchange space really does continue to grow. However, based on demand, a number of students are not able to achieve an exchange placement. So we're going to talk about how to successfully still get your student abroad despite these challenges. First, you should encourage your students to look at the competitive of individual sites. Our list with the competitiveness of each site is updated each round, and like you'd find here in the US, exchange space available across the UK differs. Just because one university has a very limited chance of placement doesn't mean that they all are very limited. The competitiveness of exchange space is based on an estimate of how much space is being created by the host institution, combined with historical demand for a particular site. Next, if your student is set on only studying abroad within the UK, they should list as many academically appropriate sites as possible. So if we can't find them space at one site, we can shift them to another site that was maybe less competitive this round. That said, if there's a reason why a student is only applying to one site, really let that shine through in the application, either through your comments or their essay. Of course, we want to be careful about counseling students into applying for a site that they would not be happy with. This sometimes, I know that we often try to get them to diversify their list, but what we don't want to do is to increase withdrawals because they actually did not want to go to a site that they listed on their application. The bottom line here is that the more sites that they list in the UK, the more likely that we'll be able to find them space in the UK. You can also help by setting the right expectations about exchange space restrictions. Talk early with the students about the possibility of applying elsewhere in the world. Remember that there are other options for students who don't get that initial placement. And lastly, direct is more often than not the best solution for students that have their heart set on one location. Do they have a heritage connection, or maybe they need to get a specific subject? Direct is the surest way that your student will receive a placement. Chances of placement are always excellent for direct, and because direct deadline does not correspond with the priority deadline, students have a lot more time to research which institution is right for them. Your best tool in order to be proactive about space restrictions will once again be on our Sites Open for U.S. Students page, so let's take another look at that. This is the same page that we looked at before, but I've scrolled down a bit so that you can see our institutions in the UK. Chances of placement, as I said, will always be excellent for direct because we're not limited by the space that's created by outbound exchange students. The only time that we'll have trouble placing a direct student is when there's an academic restriction that disqualifies the application, but even if that happens, there's room for negotiation on classes, or we can even find them another direct placement. So direct is definitely the surest chance of placement for your student. I've highlighted Napier because you can see here that their chance of placement on exchange is very limited versus Plymouth, whose chance of placement is good for next round. Students who have the flexibility to attend Plymouth should strongly consider putting it on their site request list in order to increase their chances of studying abroad in the UK. Just again, to even further highlight how the chances of placement are created, I wanted to give you a concrete example. And since we're talking about Napier, in terms of numbers, we're anticipating being able to place about 15 semesters worth of students for spring 2015. This may seem like a lot of spaces, especially considering how many students your institution takes in. This seems like a lot. However, when you consider the demand for placement across the entire network for those 15 spots, we could fill up the site multiple times over with the number of applications we have for the site. So even though a good amount of space is being created by all of our institutions across the UK, the demand is really exceptional. So now I'm going to feature 3 very different universities in the UK, one from Scotland, Napier, which we were just talking about, one from Northern Ireland, and one from England. This section will show why the advising points we just discussed are relevant for these universities in both similar and differing ways. So first, let's talk about Edinburgh Napier. Napier is currently our only site in Scotland, and this fact alone makes it one of our most competitive sites. We've discussed before about the very limited chances of placement and how that makes the priority deadline a necessity. Direct for Napier is October 15th. One of the themes of this webinar is to remember to consider program restrictions, and Napier has a few. You can find all of these on the directory page, so don't think that you need to memorize them. First, there's limited availability in a few fields of study: communication arts, design, music, photography, film. This means that each term, Napier checks with the academic department to see if they have enough seats available to accommodate requests from study abroad students. This is very important. It means that just because a student who put these classes on their application has been placed there, it does not guarantee that they've gotten those classes. Napier also requires that students looking to study in those subjects be majors of the subject and also be at least a junior. They might ask for a portfolio. And lastly, students studying in these particular subjects must only study within that field of study, so no mixing and matching across subjects. Again, no need to memorize these details because they're clearly stated on the directory page. However, not infrequently, we have students who are not very happy because they couldn't get classes in one of the fields, one of the restricted fields that we just mentioned. My inkling is that if the directory page, or if they were more familiar with the directory page, they would have known not to apply to Napier if they absolutely needed to take one of those subjects. So just to finish up about Napier, let's discuss our final theme, which is being proactive about space restrictions. So we know from the site's open for application page that exchange space is very limited. Why is that? Heritage ties. Napier is currently our only institution in Scotland. Other students are looking to go to a big international city, which Edinburgh is. Many students this round, this is an interesting fact, is that many students this round mentioned the politics that are going on in Scotland this fall. Scotland's holding a referendum to become its own country from the UK. Just keeping in mind this kind of information can help you give your student context as to why a site may have very limited exchange space, chances of placement for exchange, and help them set that right expectation. So, and of course, as always, going on direct is the easiest way for a student who has their heart set on going to Scotland, to Edinburgh, for whatever reason, to get that placement. So let's move on to Ulster. They have the same need for the priority deadline because of the competition for exchange space, and their direct deadline is the same. It's October 15th. In terms of academic restrictions, the directory page lists a few subjects that are just restricted altogether, not available to ISIP students. They include media studies, education, social work, and community youth work. Another pitfall for Ulster is that students will mistakenly choose classwork across its 4 different campuses instead of concentrating on one campus. Again, all of this is listed on the directory page. Students should be really taking the time to look at this and make sure that they qualify and can get the coursework that they need. And let's talk about why Ulster is so competitive. It is very competitive, still very competitive. I will say that we've seen a huge increase in applications from Ulster within even the past year. Very happy about that. However, it's still competitive. I think I may have them listed right now as fair chance of placement. Again, we have lots of heritage ties to the region. Students with Irish ancestry are incredibly interested in studying abroad at Ulster, And academics are also another reason why students love Ulster. This is one of those institutions where you can easily mix and match across different fields of study. So this is great for students who need to require a few different academic needs. I'm going to mention direct as an option again for students that are really intent on getting to the Emerald Isle. It's a really competitive direct fee. I have nothing but good things to say about it. Direct is the right option for a student who wants no uncertainty and can take the time to make their decision. Lastly, I wanted to talk about one of our 7 universities in England. Sunderland has the same priority deadline, but their direct deadline is actually a bit later, November 1st. So this is an example of why you should be checking that page to see if an institution is still available. The main restrictions, program restrictions that you'll see at Sunderland is with semester versus full year classes. Students need to take a look at that module guide that's linked to our directory page when selecting coursework and make sure that the classes that they're choosing are appropriate for their length of stay. Most of the competitiveness that we'll see for Sunderland is due to the subjects that they're able to offer that we can't find at other institutions in the UK, particularly studio arts, journalism, and hospitality. They tend to be attractive to our study abroad students. Sunderland is also one of our more popular direct sites because students who decide late that they want to study abroad, it's still open for them, they still have time to apply. It's also our most affordable direct fee in the UK. So I think for spring it's going to be $11,650 for tuition and housing. So now let's change direction a bit. I thought that this would be a really great opportunity to introduce our new partner, the University of Roehampton. We're going to be working hard over the next month to get their directory pages up and running, but this is a good time to get our feet wet and get an idea of what they're going to be offering our students for the spring. We're going to briefly go over its location, academics available to your students, and lastly, its chances of placement. We'll then wrap up and open the presentation for questions. I see that there's a few questions already. So we've already heard a lot of excitement about our new partner, and quite frankly, not too surprised. The University of Roehampton is located within Greater London. Students can reach central London on public transport by taking the bus to the tube. Heathrow Airport itself is only 35 minutes away. The University of Roehampton touts itself as London's campus university, and what they mean by that is that students will find tons of green space and the sense of community that they're probably used to having on a U.S. campus, and this is all due to Roehampton's compact setup. You won't find the typical city campus that maybe has buildings spread out over many blocks. This is really a campus university. Students can walk from one end of campus to the other in just a few minutes. Roehampton is going to be offering classes by the semester, which is great news. It's a lot easier for U.S. students to work with. And they will be offering quite the range of subjects: anthropology, biological sciences, business, communications, creative and performing arts, education, languages, liberal arts, psychology, social sciences, sports sciences, and lastly, London Studies. London Studies is a unique program to Roehampton. It includes lots of excursions into the city, which may be at an additional fee to the students depending on the class. But it includes classes like Art in London Museums, London in Literature, and Media, City, and Cultural Capital. This is a really big draw to a lot of their current bilateral exchange students. And so I think this will be a great fit for a lot of students who want the London experience. Students will be limited to take 2 London study classes a semester because they want students to have at least one immersion style class where they'll get to be in class with British students. So only 2 London Studies classes a semester. All courses available to ISIP students are listed on a specific study abroad course catalog. So this is a great resource for students who really need to know what classes are available to them, get classes pre-approved. Same as any other university, classes are canceled, things change, so they won't be officially enrolled until they get on campus, but they'll have a much better idea of what exactly is available to them and offered in the semester that they're going to be studying abroad. So that's great. Full year students will have even more options because the full year courses that are not included in the study abroad catalog will be available to them. So the full year students have the ability to take full year courses that are generally just available for students enrolled full-time at Roehampton. So students will be able to look at different departmental pages to see which additional classes are available to them. And lastly, we need to wrap up by talking about chances of placement. Roehampton is going to be a fabulous addition to our network, but that being said, we need to set the right expectations. We anticipate that exchange space will be very limited, especially as Roehampton launches the ISIP program for the first time, recruits its first outbound students. They really need to get the program rolled out on campus before we see larger numbers. That's true with any university. And even after the first few rounds, we'll reevaluate, but I anticipate, because of Roehampton's location, campus life, academics, this is going to be a huge draw for applications. So if your student is really set on going to Roehampton, please have them consider the direct option. Roehampton is going to be offering a direct program. Stay tuned for the fees for spring 2015. So to wrap up, today we talked about what makes an effective application for the UK by highlighting paying attention to the deadline, including sites that are true academic fits on site request lists, and being proactive about space restrictions. We also used Napier, Ulster, and Sunderland to demonstrate how to use our themes for effective applications. And then lastly, we gave you a very quick overview of our new partner, the University of Roehampton. So I'd like to now open up the discussion for questions. Feel free to use the toolbar on the right to type your questions in the question function. So let me take a look and see if there are questions that have already been asked. Okay. I have a question about why Plymouth is good and others are limited. This is really, let's go back to what I talked about it being a two-point deal of why certain sites have different chances of placement. Firstly, Plymouth sent the most students out of any university in the UK, so that alone should give them the highest chances of placement, but that especially combined with the fact that if you remember looking at their directory page, the sites available for semester students were limited, or the courses of study were limited. So English, history, art history, and some media or studio arts, those were really the only courses of study that are available on the semester basis. And as we know, U.S. students like to go abroad for a semester rather than a year. So the competition is going to be, it's going to be a little less competitive than our other sites. We have another question about how many students can apply to Roehampton. I think this question is really getting to how much space do we anticipate to be on exchange to Roehampton. It's really going to only be a handful for this first round. If this is the only site that your student wants to go to, I would recommend that they consider direct, or they make it very clear on their application as to why this is the only site they're available or that they want to go to. Otherwise, please have them consider other sites in the UK. I'm happy to, consider them for their second, third, fourth choice should I not be able to find them a spot at Roehampton. I have a question here asking about, is ISIP considering partnerships in the Republic of Ireland? This could help with the high demand for placements in the UK. That's very true. We are considering expanding to universities in the Republic of Ireland. It really depends on who is interested, and we've definitely been in discussions. But your second point about it affecting the high demand for placements in the UK, it might affect Northern Ireland, specifically Ulster, but as I kind of talked about, each site in the UK, we have a different chance of placement, different balance, so it really shouldn't affect, unless the student is open to going anywhere in the UK or Ireland, it really shouldn't affect the chances of placement across on the other island. What is the first placement round for Roehampton? When will it be included on the ISIP website? So they're going to be open for application for spring 2015. They're going to be open for both exchange and direct. And they will be up on the website. We're working with them right now, actually, to get their directory pages up and ready to go. Of course, we want to make sure all the information is very accurate, but hopefully students applying for the September 1st deadline will be able to include it on their application. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so I have a question that is not uncommon. I think this question comes up due to the fact that chances of placement in the UK does tend to be limited. It's if a student lists a bunch of UK exchange sites as their first 5 choices and then lists a less competitive site outside the UK as their 6th choice, would they automatically get the non-UK site? Let me just see if I can sum up the rest of the question. So this coordinator is just concerned about a student putting their student out of the running. Should they also include a non-UK site? The answer to that is that the student will not be out of the running. We very much consider the order in which students list the sites. We know that students put a lot of time into this, and that ultimately will have higher retention the higher up the list a student gets placed. I do have coordinators that get worried that, if they encourage them to consider something outside the UK and it ends up on the list, that they'll automatically get shuffled to that site. That is absolutely not the case. We read every application for every site, and circumstantially sometimes that means that the best fit, or because of the competitiveness of a site, a student does get moved to that non-UK site. But I would encourage you not to worry about that, and that it's in both the student's best interest and ISIP's best interest to get them placed as high up the list as they can. Okay. How do you consider applications that list exchange as first choice and direct as second choice for the same site? This is a related question, I'd say, is will the student automatically be considered only for direct? The answer to that, again, is no. We understand why students would prefer to go on exchange rather than direct. What I would encourage is, well, firstly, not to put direct if it isn't an option. Often the direct option is the only way that we're going to get that, not often, but sometimes, the only way that we're going to get that student to the UK. So don't put it on there if the student can't actually do it. If for some reason a student severely prefers exchange to to the direct option, but they're willing to do direct, tell us why on the application. Let me know through your comments that this student, for whatever reason, really prefers to go on exchange, and it's going to be the best for the student. Once again, we really want to see retention. We don't want to just see the student placed. We want to see the student follow through, complete the program, have a wonderful time. So if a student gets placed on direct and that's not really what they want to do, of course we don't want that to happen. Okay, here's a next question. If a student from our institution is placed at another English-speaking site not in the UK, does this affect the student's or this applicant's placement? Or does this applicant's placement affect the institution's Okay, I see what you're saying. So the question is essentially saying if someone has one student that's placed in the UK or maybe Australia, does it affect another student's chance of placement at a different site, a different English-speaking site? So one student in Australia, one student in the UK. This is a good question because we do, at some level, consider spreading out placement across the network. I do meet with my colleague who works with Australia and New Zealand to just talk about how we make our own individual placements, and then we discuss how those placements fill out across each institution. But that being said, every application is its own, and we are going to work to place the best students at the sites that they've asked for. So while it is something that we consider on a greater scale, because we are a network, we work as a consortium, and we want to see space at least be considered, it really does come down to the individual application and the strengths of the individual application. Okay, let's see. I have another question saying, you mentioned not paying close enough attention to restrictions as being the biggest reason for lack of placement. Would you like to share any other common problems in students' applications that you see? Well, I did definitely bring that up as the biggest issue. I can tell you that the first thing I do when I open up an application is I strike off things off the list just because I know that a student will not qualify. The other common problems that I'll see, let's see, I mean, it's really what I've talked about. When it comes to the UK, it has a lot to do with the space available. Has a lot to do with whether a student qualifies and how much demand we have versus the supply we have. Students who want to go to the UK, I find, are relatively flexible in where they go in the UK. So there's some room for negotiation should a student not choose the right subject for a specific institution. So it's not the end-all be-all, but I'd say that is definitely the biggest reason that was just mentioned, which is students disqualify themselves essentially because they didn't pick the right subject for the institution. That's the biggest reason for me striking a site off a list, because if the student's not going to have a positive academic experience, then there's no reason to place them there. So I have another question. Would we consider doing a similar webinar for Australia and New Zealand? I can definitely bring that up to our program officer for those sites, who's Brittany Parcells, and see if she'd be willing to do a similar webinar. If Scotland does vote for independence, will Edinburgh and Napier be separated out from the other UK ISIP placements? Or will this continue for the time being? I mean, I think we'd make the conscious effort on the website and all our materials to separate them out as a separate country, absolutely. It would most likely still be under my profile, and I guess what I'm struggling on with this question is that It is, all our institutions in the UK are considered separately. So I don't think it would really change in the placement processes at all. I think we'd still see an abundance of students applying to students in England, in the UK, and in Ireland all at once. So I don't think it would affect placement at all. It would probably just affect how we would market the institution. And we do try to, bring out how it is unique and how it is part of Scotland and separate that out from our institutions in England already. Yeah, it probably wouldn't affect placement too much. All right, I'm just scanning over to see if we have any further questions. I'll give it another minute if anyone wants to ask anything else. All right. It doesn't look like there's any more questions, so I'll just wrap it up. So this concludes our presentation on advising effective applications in the UK. Oh, someone just asked if we could send us the PowerPoint or send the coordinators the PowerPoint. We will be following up with registrants and people who came with the file, hopefully, but we will definitely be finding a place to put it on the website. So stay tuned for that. We'll follow up with that later. So I just wanted to finish up by saying be sure to follow ISIP on social media for our most up-to-date information. I also wanted to quickly plug ambassadors. We're currently recruiting ISIP ambassadors, so consider nominating a student if you want one on your campus. This is a great resource for your office and for ISIP, so I really encourage that. And then don't forget about our upcoming webinars for coordinators featuring different regions. They won't be exactly like this webinar, but they're coordinator-oriented webinars that are all part of the same series. You can see the link that I have up on the screen to see what other webinars we'll be offering. So thanks again for joining me. Don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions. I think you all have my email. If not, it's creynolds@isip.org. And I will be sure to be working with you very soon. Have a great day.